Right. Good afternoon, students.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. Excuse me.
Sir, today was optional paper.
Yes, I know that. Yeah, I think they're writing the exam now, right?
Second.
Second one. Is the first paper out by any chance?
Yeah, it is.
Is it? Okay. Good. Do you mind sharing that with me?
I'll share.
Because I had three students I was mentoring for the exam today. So I knew that they were writing it today.
I've sent in the group.
Okay, right. I'll have a look at it. Thank you. Okay. So I think yesterday we started with structural abnormalities, correct? So we finished talking about the remaining numerical abnormalities yesterday, especially autosomal abnormalities, Down syndrome, Patau syndrome, and Edwards syndrome, and Kaidu chart, correct, as part of the structural abnormalities we talked about. So do you guys remember what is Patau syndrome? Trisomy at what chromosome is Patau syndrome?
13.
Chromosome 13, correct? Okay. Right. So what about chromosome trisomy 18? How is that called? Trisomy 18 is it Down syndrome? Edwards syndrome, correct? Trisomy 13 is Patau syndrome. Trisomy 18 is Edwards syndrome. Okay, 1 in 7,500 cases is trisomy 18 incidence, whereas Patau's is more rarer, twofold rarer than that. So 1 in 15,000 cases. Okay, Down syndrome is one of the most common ones, 1 in 800 cases that we talked about. Approximately, roughly, sometimes you see 500, sometimes you see 1 in 1,000. It depends on population also sometimes. So different sources would give slightly different numbers. Okay, right. So what else we talked about yesterday? Yes, we started with structural abnormalities, correct? Let's continue with structural abnormalities. What are the different types of structural abnormalities that we started talking about yesterday? Vishal?
Deletion, duplication,
Deletion, duplication,
inversion,
inversion, fourth
and
one.
translocation.
So what happens in deletion, Shweta?
So in deletion, some portion is is deleted or is not there.
So some sequence is deleted from the DNA or chromosome, correct? Okay, right. Any example, Sunil? Can you give an example for deletion? Any known example of a known problem that happens because of deletion? Okay, I was telling you that this is an autosomal abnormality. What example is that I was telling you? Out of those 4, we have in 9.4c, out of 4, 3 belong to numerical abnormalities, one belongs to structural abnormality. Which one is that? Which happens to be the example of deletion?
Is it cat?
Something to do
Cloudy
with
cat.
cat, correct? So is it some type of cat disease?
Chat something.
Babies
Cloudy.
cry cats, or babies cry sounds like cats sound, right? So cry-do-chat syndrome it is called. Okay, get used to it. Cry-do-chat syndrome. Cry-do-chat syndrome. Okay, that happens because of deletion. And Shweta, do you remember what chromosome undergoes deletion and that leads to this cry-do-chat syndrome? Deletion is seen in which chromosome? Roughly.
Sir, chromosome 5.
Chromosome 5, correct. Which arm? Vishal, do you remember? Which arm of the chromosome 5?
P arm.
P. So what is P arm? P arm is?
Short
Shorter arm
arm.
of the chromosome. So sometimes we have shorter and longer arms of the chromosome depending on the centromere position. P arms for petite, so it's a short arm. Q arm is a long arm. So short arm of the chromosome 5 shows deletion. Okay, right. What about duplication? So duplication is the multiplication or addition of a sequence on a chromosome. One chromosome receives extra piece. Correct? Okay. Any known examples for duplication event?
Fragile X syndrome.
Correct. Fragile X syndrome. An additional portion on the X chromosome is seen. This is called Fragile X syndrome. Okay. Also, duplication on chromosome 15 sometimes lead to symptoms like autism. Okay. Right. So Fragile X syndrome and duplication in chromosome 15. Usually some large duplication. Sometimes along with that reinversion. Both together results in some form of autism and also includes seizures, mental retardation. Okay. Otherwise, Fragile X is an example for that. In genetics, we normally hear about Fragile X. Okay. This is a result of duplication event on an X chromosome. Okay, good. So now next we will talk about, or we'll begin discussing about inversion. Okay, inversion means inverting something. And this nice image shows how inversion actually takes place. Okay, so inversion happens when chromosomal segment excises, meaning it kind of detaches. If this is a chromosome, a portion of that gets detached, somehow cut, okay, and reintegrates after 180-degree turn. So meaning you take it and you turn it 180 degrees. So you flip it basically and again gets joined. Okay. So this event can result in what is called inversion, getting inverted. So changing the order of the genes. Remember that image I was showing you initially? You have A, B, C, D, E, F. B, C, D will actually reorient. So what you notice here, D, C, B, you will notice instead of B, C, D. Correct? So it changes the order of the sequence in a given chromosome. Okay, such a process is called inversion. So inversion of a sequence. So inversion is a result of or happens when a chromosomal sequence or a segment gets detached or gets excised and reintegrate after 180-degree turn. It looks like an event in Rajinikanth's movie, right? Okay, but yes, I think it is very difficult to perceive how it happens in the cell, but we have some predictions related to that. So scientists have some theories, some ideas how this could happen. They know the result. By comparing it with a normal chromosome, is it possible to identify that what had happened? If you analyze the chromosome and if you know what sequences should be present, if you really analyze, if something had gone wrong, then you're clearly seeing that this portion got inverted in this chromosome. How does it happen? They predict something, and there are some ways of seeing it, but you cannot picture this. Very rare event, we don't know when does that happen. So we predict it, and there is a way to identify the sequence, the order of the particular genes in the given chromosome like that. Right. So I think I'll probably show you this image. This is what is kind of an explained mechanism for this. Okay. So here what are you noticing? A, B, C, D, E, F is present on this, and centromere is here. So what happens, sometimes it forms like a loop-like structure. You see, A has formed a loop-like structure. It's like a string like this, but you form a loop. What happens? A goes like this. A, B, C, D, E, F goes like this, and you make a break here. It's like take scissors and cut it there. Cut at this region, this junction. So what happens? 4 pieces will form temporarily. Is A and F, and you will see E, D, C, B, and rejoining happens. You glue it again. So it gets cut here and it gets rejoined, resulting in the complete flipping of the sequence. Right? Do you see it? So you take A, B, C, D, E, and you make a loop of that. So it actually turns by 180 degrees, make a cut, and then rejoin. So basically the idea is to bring or revert the sequence from BCDE to EDCB. So it was like this, BCDE. Now the result is this. This got flipped. So now you read backward, EDCB. Okay. So formation of a loop-like structure, break, and rejoining results in something that looks like this.
Sir, we have so many chromosome in the cells. So they compare it with the other cells chromosome and then figure it out.
Exactly. So you compare it with normal chromosome where there is no inversion, and side by side compare the sequences. We have many analytical tools and computational tools these days, which can even predict and tell you what's happening. There are even computer programs, software programs that can identify this for you. Okay. So there are 2 types of inversions that we hear, and with reference to the centromere. So some inversions where centromere is not part of the inversion process, so it is not involved in that. Meaning, so this may be excluded from the inversion process. Some where centromere is part of the inversion because the inverted region contains centromere. So if this is the region, if this flipping happened, okay, so centromere is part of it, is involved in that. Depending on that, either you call it pericentric or paracentric inversion. So inversions can be of pericentric inversions or paracentric inversions. So in this particular image, what do you see? The chromosome breaks are happening here. In this, the entire chromosome is in purple in color, leaving out the regions which are inverted, green and red, more or less, that you see. This is what is inverted. And centromere is here. This constriction you see is centromere. If centromere is not part of this inversion, such an inversion is called paracentric inversion. Such an inversion is called paracentric inversion. So centromere is not involved in paracentric inversions. Whereas in pericentric inversions, as you see here, centromere is part of the inversion process. Cuts happen around the centromere and it got inverted and reinserted. That is called pericentric inversion. Is this clear? Is the difference between pericentric and paracentric clear? Pericentric includes centromere, paracentric doesn't include it. So the example that we have seen here, is it pericentric or paracentric? The example that we have seen, or mechanism that we have seen. What type of inversion is it? Peri or para?
Para.
Para. So centromere is not involved here. Pericentromere here. This dot. Where are the breaks happening? Here and here. So is it peri or para if centromere is involved? Is centromere part of the inverted region here? Yes,
No.
sir. No?
Is it pericentric?
That is my question.
It is, sir. As in, I think there is a lot of change.
Yes, sir.
Actually, it covered this whole BCDE region surrounding centromere. So centromere is involved. It got flipped. Centromere is part of it. So it is pericentric inversion. It is something like this. But we have a huge region here. Out of 6 genes, 4 genes are involved. Okay, and that includes also the centromere. So it is pericentric inversion. So the question is simple. Here we just talked about paracentric inversion happens outside the centromere. Pericentric involves the centromere. The question is whether the image that we have seen here, is it pericentric or paracentric? Is the inverted region includes centromere or not? It did, right? B, C, D, E. They both are around the centromere. It got flipped. So centromere is part of it. It is called pericentric inversion.
Sir,
Okay.
but here the loop is also, I mean, it is opposite to the one number. I mean, the first loop on the left, it is not the same sequence as.
Look at this.
Okay, fine.
Centromere is here. It's actually like this. You take the string and you actually pull it like this. Then sequence flips, right? Like take a thread and then pull it like this. Okay, but include centromere. So this part has centromere in it. Correct? Okay. So what is the effect of inversion? So you can guess these things. Okay, few of them, if not all of them. I think this is something I have to tell you. So sometimes because, let's say we talked about A, B, C, D, E, F. E went near A. Okay, sometimes what happens? Genes may move into active regions or active regions move into inactive regions. So I need to briefly tell you what are active and inactive regions. Sometimes, because of the, how is that called? Because of the folding or because of the, what is normally called, so when chromosome is forming because of the condensation. So chromosomes, some regions of the chromosomes are highly condensed, some regions of the chromosomes are less condensed. Highly condensed regions tend to be inactive. It's like very tightly coiled. You cannot get access to those genes. You cannot transcribe them easily. You cannot translate them easily. Okay, such regions are inactive regions. So highly dense regions tend to be inactive. So like that, this region may end up in highly dense region. So if it is supposed to be active region, ends up in inactive region or highly dense region, and vice versa. So because of the shifting of location, they may become active or they may become inactive. So that will that have enough impact on physiology depending on if there is any particular function to that region? Yes, correct. If it changes the location like that, it may have drastic impact. So inversion can be sometimes harmful or beneficial. And some are silent, some may be lethal. So depending on what gene is it, what gene got activated, some of them may be silent, some of them may be lethal. If it results in some sort of cancerous genes or oncogenes or tumor suppressor genes, especially oncogenes, I'm going to briefly tell you about that a little later, it may become lethal. Okay, so the effect outcome may be silent, so no effect, or it may be lethal. So imagine inversion has taken place. So homologous chromosomes have come together and one of them has inverted sequence. If crossing over happens, will that affect the recombination process? Because two homologous chromosomes normally come together, they exchange the pieces. And normally if they're aligned properly, only sequence will change. Order of the genes will not change because you are switching exactly the same thing. So information doesn't change. It's like this. You have two textbooks, two different books. You switched same chapter. So you moved one chapter, second chapter to this book, same second chapter to that book. Order of the lessons won't change. The actual content may change. Correct? So in an event like that, if before this event happened, an inversion has taken place. So will that affect the recombination or not? Or can that affect the recombination? Are you able to follow what I just explained?
Yes, sir.
What do you think?
Just like how duplication due to the misalignment, extra
Right.
was added. Probably similar effect could happen. Maybe
It won't be similar because there what had happened, misalignment, chromosomes didn't align in the right areas. It aligned like this. So switching may pull extra piece of the gene from this one of the chromosomes. So their additional piece is obtained. But here, actually what happened, inversion has taken place. So meaning, let's say this chromosome is normal, this chromosome has inverted sequence. When they both came together, because of the recombination, what happened, inverted region may move to the another chromosome. So gamete formation and the further consequences may be different when an inverted chromosome gets involved in the recombination process. So it can affect the crossing over basically. I'm explaining you how. Next, source of genetic variation. For whatever reason, if this happens and gets activated or sequence gets changed, will that result in the new variety? Okay, it may change the sequence of the given DNA. Sometimes it may even add the variation to the existing cell. And sometimes it may be advantageous. Okay, sometimes this may have survival advantage. That is why this might have been kept through natural selection. So this is briefly about what could happen after inversion, or what is the outcome of inversion. Okay, good. That's about inversion. I don't think there are any specific known cases or examples for inversion. So we'll talk about translocations next. Translocation. So what is translocation? Translocation is a bit complicated compared to the deletion and duplication and inversion. Okay, but you could follow this. Remember, like what we were talking about so far with respect to recombination. Recombination where two homologous chromosomes, meaning two similar chromosomes, chromosome 1 of mother, chromosome 1 of father in you might come together and exchange the pieces. That is recombination, right? So recombination happens between what chromosomes, homologous chromosomes or non-homologous chromosomes. This is important for you to understand, is okay?
homologous.
Homologous, correct? So chromosome 1, chromosome 1. If you are comparing chromosome 1 and chromosome 3, are they homologous chromosomes? No. What type of chromosomes are they?
Heterologous.
Yeah, you can call heterologous or non-homologous. Okay, right. So this looks as if a recombination is happening between two non-homologous chromosomes. Translocation. Trans means different. Okay, in this particular case, what are you noticing here? There is one chromosome, another chromosome, two non-homologous chromosomes you see here. A portion from this chromosome is moved here, and a portion from this chromosome moved here. They're exchanging genetic segments. So translocation can be defined as a process where chromosomal segments between two non-homologous chromosomes are exchanged. So exchange of chromosomal segments between two non-homologous chromosomes. Exchange of chromosomal segments between two non-homologous chromosomes is called as translocation. Okay, there are different types of translocations. Okay, briefly we'll have a look at these types of translocations. Here it is called reciprocal, reciprocating, means each exchanging it equally. So this portion went here, this portion went here. So the result is this. Correct? If you write like this A, B, C, D, E, F, and if you write here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So what happens? EF went after like 1, 2, 3, EF. It may look like because EF from this region might have gone here. So you can number like that and explain it. That will be easier. A, B, C, D, E, F. You can write like that and move EF to this portion. Move EF to this portion. So here you write 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, either if you want write 3 and write EF. Similarly, here you have A, B, C, D instead of EF. So you may have 3, 4 came here. So like that you number them 1, 2, 3, 4. You identify them with alphabets and show the bottom pieces, or you can show any pieces top or bottom as if they are switched. That's how you can explain it with a diagram. So such a type of translocation is called reciprocal translocation. If they talk about structural abnormalities, just briefly mention about it. You will not have room to write about them unless they specifically ask about translocations inversions, which I have not seen. They generally ask about structural abnormalities, explain structural abnormalities humans with examples. They may ask it like that. Okay. The next one is Robertsonian translocation. The second type is called Robertsonian translocation. So what is Robertsonian translocation? Can you have a look at this image and see what had happened?
Both Q arms got translocated.
Exactly, fusion between. So normally this happens in one type of chromosomes called acrocentric chromosomes. Acro. I'll talk to you about this in karyotyping where I'll give you the classes of different chromosomes. But for now, just remember, depending on the position of centromere, your centromere looks as if it is at the end. Okay, but it is not at the end. Normally, the chromosomes will have a small portion like this here. Okay, such chromosomes are called acrocentric chromosomes. I'll show you here in this image. So in Robertsonian translocation, So which is named after Robert Sun, who identified this type of translocation in grasshoppers. Okay, where two acrocentric chromosomes, okay, although it is little misleading here, it looks like they are telocentric. Telo means tail. It looks like centromere is at the end, one end. In such cases, they're called telocentric, but they're not telocentric. They're acrocentric, meaning the small portion, which is not obvious from this image, maybe a small portion of chromosome is here, small portion of chromosomal piece here. So P arm is so small as if the centromere looks as if it is at the end of the chromosome arm. Okay, basically centromere is towards one end. I'm not saying it is at the end. In the image, it looks as if it is at the end, but it is towards the end. Such chromosomes are called acrocentric. So don't worry, we'll come across this again. We'll talk about that. But for now, just remember. So it is where centromere is towards the end. When they fuse, when two such chromosomes actually fuse or they translocate, what happens? You will see a chromosome which looks as if it has a centromere towards the center, not towards the end. See the result here? Okay. So such a process is called Robertsonian translocation because Robertsonian or Robertson has identified this for the first time. Okay, don't worry about homologous, non-homologous. Okay, basically between same chromosomes or different chromosomes.
Seems like the chromosomes got inverted.
Same.
It seems like that the chromosomes got inverted. One of them.
It looks like that, yes. It looks as if they're inverted. Not sure if I have another image. They don't have to invert. Okay, the representation here shows as if they're inverted. They don't have to. Okay, they may just join. If they're two pieces like this, they may join like this. Two pieces may come like this. Okay, they don't have to invert. Although image looks like that, but it is probably not the case. I'll give you one human example because so translocation is the common form of structural abnormality in us. So compared to deletions, duplications, inversions, translocation is more common in humans. Excuse me. Okay. So do you understand the difference between the reciprocal translocation and Robertsonian translocation? And translocations usually may not gain or lose any genetic information. They're just changing the position. But changing the position may also have a different impact, but gene sequences are not lost. Unlike the case with deletion, gene sequences are not lost. They only change their position. But even changing position can have different consequences as we were talking about in the inversion. So if it gets to the active region from inactive region, activation may happen. Okay, we'll see such an example here. So we have not talked about karyotyping yet, but I was briefly talking to you about karyotyping process in the other class, right? So karyotyping means organizing the chromosomes in an order to see if there is any abnormality in the chromosome number and structure. There's an advanced form of karyotyping called SCI. So we'll briefly explain this in unit 9.1. But for now, just understand that this method is an advancement of karyotyping. So what do they do here? Instead of using those big and weird chromosomes, okay, with specific type of pattern or a banding pattern, which is a traditional method of karyotyping, here they use some sort of fluorescent probes, meaning as if they add a fluorescent color and one color to one chromosome. So remember, this is something that you need to understand. So here you are staining or adding color to the chromosomes in such a way that all chromosomes are labeled with different colors. So let's say one chromosome is yellow, one other chromosome is red. Okay, one chromosome is pink, purple. So like that, do you see chromosomes are painted differently? in that case, can you identify if translocation has taken place? You have an yellow chromosome, red chromosome. They both underwent translocation. How will the resultant chromosome look like? Yellow chromosome, red chromosome, both underwent translocation. What will be the resultant chromosome? How will that look like?
Combination of colors.
Like what colors? So partly yellow, partly red, correct? In this example. So do you see such things here? Look at the image. Either of the images, it doesn't matter. Do you see combinations like that? Majority of the chromosomes have individual color. Red color, yellow color, right? Pink color, blue. But some chromosomes have portions. This has yellow and orange. This has, maroon and blue. Pink and green. What does it mean? Translocation has taken place. Chromosomes with different colors got fused or have translocated regions in them. Okay, so there is a way, there's advanced methods or more sensitive karyotyping methods that can be used to study such translocations. Either you see here, and the different colors here, shown with arrow marks here. Okay, that's how we can reveal translocations, and which are common forms of structural aberrations in humans. So this method SKY is also sometimes called spectral karyotyping. It's like spectrum of colors. It is called spectral KY or spectral karyotyping. Okay, let's look at examples now. So far we talked about what is translocation. Two types of translocations we talked about. Okay, and how to diagnose or detect the translocation. Let's look at the example or examples. There are so many examples. As I was telling you, it is common one. We'll have an example here. So this is an example where a specific type of leukemia happens because of translocation process. This is called a chronic myelogenous leukemia. It's a type of leukemia, blood cancer, white blood cancer. Leukocytes are WBCs, correct? So their cancer is called leukemia. Okay, chronic myelogenous leukemia or CML in short it is called. How is that caused? So here two chromosomes that you are seeing, chromosome 9 and chromosome 22, translocation that happens between chromosome 9 and chromosome 22. So in this what happens? The result of the exchange here, this chromosome 9 gets elongated and chromosome 22, also known as Philadelphia chromosome, is called Philadelphia chromosome. Chromosome 22 in this case is called Philadelphia. So what do you notice here? Yellow region from this is moved near to red color region on the chromosome 22. Indeed, it splits it. It splits the, as you notice, it splits the BCR gene on chromosome 22 and it gets inserted between that. That is why you see yellow color flanked by red colors here. So portion of the ABL gene got inserted into BCR gene on chromosome 22. And this type of translocation results in CML, chronic myelogenous leukemia.
even part of 22 goes into chromosome 9.
So you see this color? Yeah, there was just blue color, right? So this shift had happened here. That is what results in elongation of the 9th chromosome 9. But the known phenotype or known problem happens when this ABL moves between the BCR gene on chromosome 22. That's what results in this abnormality. Otherwise, it's translocation. So exchange has to happen. Excuse me. Right. So there are many such examples. Sorry?
And the resultant 22 chromosome is called Philadelphia chromosome.
Yes. This 22nd chromosome, when it contains ABL and BCR fusion, it is called a Philadelphia chromosome.
So here in the point it says the altered ABL gene functions improperly. So it is a fused ABL BCR gene. Is that the altered one?
Yes. So it is actually in the context of a different gene sequence, right? So in a way, it is actually changed or altered contextually. Okay. Such a gene fusion results in the problem like this. You will understand that because it's a type of cancer. Something gets activated here. What gets activated? I'll briefly talk to you in an example. Don't have to by heart anything here, okay? Just wanted to show you translocation results in several different types of cancers. Okay, so here what you are noticing on the left-hand side, names of the cancers. I don't think it will be easy for you to remember many of them. Acute leukemia, CML we talked about, Burkitt lymphoma, mantle cell lymphoma, T cell, ALL, Ewing sarcoma, prostatic adenocarcinoma. These are all different types of cancers. Usually they tend to have OMA at the end. Certain specific types of cancers have that. Okay, and various translocations, chromosome 9 to 22, 8 to 21, 15 to 17, 8 to 14, 11 to 14, 10 to 14, 21 to 21. Look at this. So the range of events happen in us and many genes, many different types of genes. So oncogenes are these genes when get activated, they result in cancers. I'll briefly talk to you about cancer. Okay. So these are examples for the translocation process. Is it clear? Is the translocation clear to you? Okay, so this is about structural abnormalities. 4 abnormalities we talked about here: deletion, duplication, inversion, and translocation. Okay, leaving out for inversion, rest of the 3 examples we talked about mechanism and as well as the examples, human examples. And the most common one being the translocation process. Okay, I've seen once they asked a question on oncogenes, to write short notes on oncogenes 10 years ago, of course. They asked to write a question on oncogenes. So briefly, as we are talking about oncogenes as examples for translocation, I'll briefly tell you what it is. Okay. So roughly, you all know what is cancer and what causes cancer. What is your understanding about cancer? What causes cancer?
Overproduction of a particular type of cells.
Overproduction of particular type of a cell. Okay.
Or
So
uncontrolled cell division.
Uncontrolled cell division. Okay. Because usually our body parts and any growth in any body part, in any tissue, limits itself till the boundary of that cell, correct? And the boundary of that tissue. But in cancerous cells, what happens? People may have bulgings like this. They may have a tumor coming out like this, may have a tumor coming out like this, or internally tumor may be formed, pushing everything else out. Okay, so that is the abnormality because our cell division, we talked about cell division, right? Cell division is a very controlled process, very regulated process. But at times what happens is regulation is lost. Take the analogy of a traffic police. Let's say traffic police sitting in a junction. Okay, supposed to stop vehicles coming from one side and regulate the movement of the traffic. But somewhat abnormalities happened to him. He lost his hand, let's say. He's supposed to hold one hand on one side and another hand on the other side to control the traffic. Let's say for some reason he actually lost his arm. Would he be able to control that process? He may not be. There are ways, but just wanted to give you an idea that he was using his arm to control traffic in certain direction. So similarly, assume that we have a gene or the DNA sequence which is supposed to do the job of controlling, regulating cell division. But that part is lost. So its function will also be lost, correct? The function of that arm of the policeman or traffic police will be lost. Similarly, the loss of function in some genes or gain of function in abnormal genes. Let's say there was a mischievous guy standing in the junction. He's supposed to stop on one side and leave the other side. But he's very mischievous. He's actually not doing that. He's actually confusing everyone. Okay. So he's actually causing more problem to the traffic when he behaves like that. So similarly, some of our genes gets activated where they're not supposed to be active, they get activated, resulting in this abnormal function of cells. But whatever it is, combinations of such mutations, such changes in our DNA sequences results in cancer. So what is cancer? Cancer is the uncontrollable multiplication of cells. Uncontrolled cell division, for example. Uncontrolled multiplication of cells resulting in tumors. Tumors. Okay. So what causes cancer? Any idea what causes cancer? I was telling you, abnormality in the genes, mutations in certain genes. One category of genes which gets activated, another category of genes which is supposed to be suppressed. Okay, mutations in those genes which normally control cell division results in cancer. But what causes this mutation? So it could be mutagens, right? We talked about mutagens and mutation. So mutagens are mutation causing components. It could be chemicals like fertilizers, pesticides, some sort of poisons, or it could be light like UV can cause damage to our DNA. So when you expose too much to the UV in the sun, it may result in cancer. Okay. So mutagens like chemicals, and we talked about the UV radiation like UV, sometimes viruses. They can cause cancer. They can cause these mutations, and mutations can cause cancer. Okay. There are few hallmarks of cancer, meaning few features that you see that cancerous cells have, but normal cells don't. I think nowadays they added so many points to this, but traditionally this is what we used to think about, or we used to learn about. 6 hallmarks of cancer. What does it do? So first, we have something called self-sufficiency in growth signals. They keep receiving signals to multiply, divide. Doesn't matter whether there is enough food, there is any need for it. So they keep receiving growth signals. So signals to multiply, signals to grow. Self-sufficiency in growth signals. And not only growth signals they receive, they also don't receive or don't accept these death signals. So there's a process called apoptosis we learn in unit 12. Okay, unit 10, not in unit 12. We're going to learn in unit 10. So where we process called apoptosis or cell death happens. So they evade apoptosis. So they don't accept the signals for the death. So they receive too many growth signals. They prevent cell death.
They do not let the cell die.
They don't die, yes. They don't die, but they keep multiplying. Okay, kind of causing traffic jams in our body and congestion in the body. Okay, right. So insensitivity to growth signals or anti-growth signals. In a way opposite to what we talked about here. So they overlap here. Self-sufficiency in growth signals, insensitivity, meaning not accepting the anti-growth signals. Not only cell death, but they don't even let the slowing down of the cell division, slowing down of the growth process. So they become insensitive. It's like diabetes, type 1 diabetes. What happens? We keep receiving insulin, but cells don't respond to insulin. So it's there. Anti-growth signals are there, but cells don't respond to it. The mutation has resulted in that resistance. Okay, next. For a cell division to happen, we need to constantly produce energy, right? Constantly supply energy. Cell division requires enough energy, right? And supply of energy happens in our body through blood. Blood carries energy, correct? So sustained angiogenesis. Angiogenesis refers to formation of blood vessels. So one of the hallmark of cancer is formation of new blood vessels. Formation of new blood vessels, which is referred to angiogenesis, genesis or production of new blood vessels. Angiogram, angiography, you hear about something related to the heart. So here it is formation of blood vessels.
At the location of cancer or anywhere?
To the cell which is undergoing the cancerous growth. So energy is now demanded for supporting the cell division. So the cell which is undergoing this tumor formation or undergoing the cancer would require new blood vessels. Okay, The fifth one is limitless replicative potential. Limitless replicative potential. So keep multiplying. Doesn't matter whether it is touching your arm, this tissue doesn't matter. It will keep growing outside your body. You probably see people having tumors like this, tumors on the heads, tumors on any part of the body, inside or outside. Limitless replicative potential. Keep growing and is not following the rules of cell division. Contact inhibition we call. Whenever it touches a tissue, touches a boundary, it should stop growing, but then follow that. They grow into it's like someone, your neighbor building a home into your home. Correct? It's like they get into the other tissues and keeps pushing them. That is a big problem with cancer. These tumors push the other regions and causing harm and interfere the normal physiological functions. Imagine what happens if the tumor takes place in brain. Squeezes everything. Brain is already congested. It squeezes everything. Okay, the last one, tissue invasion and metastasis. Not every tumor that we see becomes cancerous. We actually, although sometimes people interchangeably use the terms tumor and cancer. So tumor is usually something that is localized. It stays there. But when it goes through a process called metastasis, metastasis is a process where it becomes cancerous. Meaning it is starting to move from that region to the other regions and metastasize, meaning starting to overtake those regions, starting to multiply there. So let's say someone has a tumor formed in the tongue. It moves through the various parts like lymph nodes that we have through channels, can get into lungs, can get into kidneys, can get into stomach, and again forms new tumors there. Such a process is called cancerous process. It keeps spreading throughout the body. That is the biggest problem with this. Okay, instead of staying, sometimes it becomes metastasized. This is a process of becoming cancer. Small tumor becoming cancer, benign tumor or a local tumor becoming cancer. That process is called metastasis, and eventually it invades the tissues. It moves to various tissues and destroys them, invades them. Such a process is called, okay, invasion, and conversion into cancerous form is called metastasis. Okay, right. So this is a brief overview about what causes cancer and few hallmarks of cancer. In case if they happen to ask you a short note on cancer, so what is cancer? Define it. Talk about key features of cancer. What causes this type of mutations? And plus, I'd like to briefly talk to you about the oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes, the two categories of genes which are affected during the cancerous process. Because I was briefly telling you activation or inactivation, right? So what gets activated, what gets inactivated? Two categories of genes we need to know, oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. I made a brief summary on this. I'm going to share that handout with you where I briefly explained this concept, causes of cancer, examples, carcinogens I talked about. Okay, so the explanation I'm giving here, if you read from the material handout I'm going to give you, you'll be able to follow it. Okay, there are at least two different types of genes. There are more than two, but two more popular genes are called oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. So what are they? Analogy wise, first I'll give an analogy, then I'll explain more on this. Oncogenes, genes responsible for the active growth. It's like accelerator on the car or on a bike. Why do you use accelerator? To increase the speed. Similarly, oncogenes are responsible for increasing the growth of the normal body. In this case, as we are seeing, oncogenes, these genes responsible for the growth of the cancers, growth of the tumors. Such genes are called oncology is related to cancer, study of cancer, right? Oncogenes, genes that cause cancer. Okay, so sometimes you hear this, sometimes you hear the word proto-oncogenes. Before becoming oncogenes, they are called proto-oncogenes, meaning before getting activated, these genes are called, write this flowchart. Okay, proto-oncogenes. Initially, we call them proto-oncogenes before they get activated. Once they get activated, they become oncogenes. Activated proto-oncogenes are called oncogenes. Okay. So once it gets activated, what does it do? Their job is to give growth signals to cancerous cells. So it results in the enhanced growth rate. So oncogenes, when activated, results in increased growth rate or enhanced growth rate, eventually leading to tumor formation and cancer. Okay, there are many examples of proto-oncogenes, some growth factors. So some genes which actually support the growth process. So we call them growth factors. So we need them as signals for growth to happen in our body. Okay, but what happens? Some of them can lead to cancer. So when they get activated because of mutations, so we'll see cancer happening. Okay, this is enough, but I don't think we need to have more details. But if you're interested, even some receptors which gets activated to this process, and some signal factors. So something that actually carries a signal to activate something else. Okay, there are many proto-oncogenes, difficult for you to remember. I've mentioned this factual data in the handout, something called PDGF, proto. So this is a growth factor, particular type of growth factors, receptors, and something that controls the cell cycle. They're supposed to control the cell cycle, okay, but they actually kind of go overboard. They don't control, they keep letting the cell division to happen. So this is one category of genes. They're called oncogenes. So activation of which results in cancer. On the other end, we also have set of genes called tumor suppressor genes. What are they? Tumor suppressor genes. So as the name implies, what do they do? What do they suppress?
Tumors.
Suppress tumors. So what needs to happen for cancers to take place here? So what should happen to tumor suppressor genes? For oncogenes, they need to get activated. For tumor suppressor genes, whose job is to suppress tumor formation, what has to happen for cancer to take place?
Inactivate.
Inactivating tumor suppressor genes. As you see here, tumor suppressor genes are inactivated, leading to cancers. As opposed to activation of oncogenes, which leads to increased growth and cancer. In case of tumor suppressor genes, they get inactivated, leading to cancer.
Shouldn't it be opposite? Like tumor suppressor genes gets activated and it suppresses the tumor.
In normal conditions, yes. For cancers to happen. In normal conditions, oncogenes supposed to be suppressed, tumor suppressor genes supposed to be active. But when things go wrong, when tumor suppressor genes are inactivated, whose job is to suppress the tumors, their job is lost.
Right.
It's like, instead of having police in a police station, have thieves controlling police station. So it's like, you switch the roles. So oncogenes, which supposed to be inactive, they get activated. Tumor suppressor genes, which supposed to be inactivated, they get activated. In these abnormal conditions, because of several mutations in our body, it results in cancer. That is why cancer doesn't happen easily. Cancer is a result of several mutations, but because of our current day-to-day activities, lifestyle, and our exposure to pollutants and the type of food that we eat, which is usually contaminated, is now, because of those factors, cancers have become very common and heritable. Cancer doesn't get inherited, but some mutations get inherited. If mutations happen to have this oncogenes, like for example, breast cancer, we have something called BRCA1. This gene is common in families who shows breast cancer. So this BRCA gene, we sometimes refer to, these mutations are seen. So some mutations are inherited. Along with these mutations, other mutations would result in the cancer. It's a complex process, but unfortunately, It is becoming more common these days. And this is briefly about oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. I'll give you one example of tumor suppressor gene here.
Sir, are these both present by default in our body, or?
Yes, they are there. Their job is to control this process, but unfortunately, they get mutated. So they are part of our body.
So oncogenes function is to control.
Oncogenes function is to allow the cell growth to a certain extent. But what happens, because of some mutations in them, they continue to give growth signals, although they are not supposed to. Okay, in normal conditions, they're supposed to function. It's like accelerator. It's like this. You actually need to accelerate to go at certain speed. But what if you cannot move your accelerator down? So that is what happens. When it's supposed to be down, when it's supposed to be not active, it keeps activated. Then what happens? It would result in accidents. Similarly, this growth signal, like an accelerator, an uncontrolled fashion, can result in growth signals, and which results in the tumors. Okay, otherwise they're natural part of our body.
Some injury also give rise to cancer sometimes when
What
it
is-
is not treated.
Some
Some form of injury can also result in cancer when it is not treated.
I don't think so, but I've seen few cases where people tongue cancers. One of my family member had, I think, probably had little disturbance in the initial classes, where one of my family member had a cancer, where his teeth was actually kind of poking into his tongue, and eventually that became cancer. Of course, there must be different reasons inside. Okay, but otherwise, such things actually may lead to cancers. But usually, simple injuries may not become cancerous. There must be other factors, but that may become a trigger factor in some cases. Okay. Yeah. So example for a tumor suppressor gene is P53 gene. This is a very famous gene. It's a tumor suppressor gene which is normally present in our body, and this is what its job. You will understand this. Okay. Look at this example. It will become clear why is it normally present, and inactivation of that results in cancer. For what reason? So normal P53. P53 is an example for tumor suppressor gene. So in our body, sometimes let's say you got exposed to UV light. There may be DNA damage has happened in your cell. So when DNA damage takes place or any other cell cycle abnormalities takes place, this gene called P53 gets activated. And what does it do? It will stop the cell cycle. It will say cell cycle to pause and says, let me first repair the DNA, or let me allow the DNA repair to take place. Only after DNA repair, cell cycle resumes. So do you see the job of P53? P53 gets produced in response to DNA damage. Why does DNA damage takes place? DNA damage may take place when we are exposed to something like those carcinogens, like mutagens, like UV. So that damaged DNA that is present in this cell cycle or in a cell that is undergoing cell division. So P53 stops that cell from dividing. It pauses that cell cycle process, allowing the DNA repair. Okay, only after DNA repair takes place, cell cycle gets restarted or resumed. So this is the role of P53. But sometimes DNA damage is maybe too much. It is not repairable. What happens? So this cell is sent for apoptosis or cell death. It will be like you cannot refix the car. Let's say, what do? You'll dump the car. You cannot have car just like that if you're not able to fix it. Similarly, if cell is not repairable, it will be dumped, it will be killed, resulting in apoptosis. I was just talking to you today. So this is the role of P53. So see it here at the bottom, either you write in the flowchart like this or the steps here. When cellular damage occurs, P53 arrests the cell cycle until the damage is repaired. If damage cannot be repaired, apoptosis takes place. So this is a normal condition. Okay. Okay. So what happens in the mutant version of P53? Simply, if I have to tell you, P53 cannot do its job. It will not stop or cannot stop the cell cycle for DNA repair. So what happens here? Mutant P53, if mutation happens in the P53 gene, so mutation in the tumor suppressor gene. So what happens? Cell cycle continues without repairing the DNA. And because of this lack of proper signals and regulation, it becomes cancerous. So this results in the cancer. So do you see how P53, how affecting or damage to P53 or mutation in P53 results in cancer? Okay, that is a very good example, very well-known example in this field.
Sir, but we have the cell has gone for apoptosis, right? After the damage.
If P53 normally functions, two things can happen here. One, either DNA damage is fixed, or if it cannot be fixed, apoptosis takes place. But P53 is not functioning. None of this will take place. It will not stop the cell cycle, a cell to fix it. It will continue. It's like traffic signal. The policeman is not working. He's mutant. Maybe let's say he is drunk. So what happens to the traffic? It will keep moving. So it's like it will become inactive. It will become ineffective.
Sir, that means the cancer is rising from the gene itself, not from the cell.
So how is we're talking about two different levels here. So genes are the program. Genes is a program inside the cell. So cell operated by the gene. So in a way they both are connected to each other. Because of the abnormalities in gene, cancer can happen. And cancer happens at the cellular level. Changes happen at the sequence level, DNA level. Cancer happens at the cellular level. Okay, effects on gene sequences, especially in these regions like tumor suppressor genes and oncogenes, results in cancer where cells keep dividing. So the effect is at the cellular level.
But sir, in the normal scenario, if cell gets damaged, so either of the conditions should happen. But why is it not happening? Is because P53 is not able to do. But P53 is not able to do because it is damaged. it should get repaired, right? Or go for apoptosis.
Come again. I didn't get the very first. What was the first part you said?
I think he's suggesting why doesn't P53 get fixed, right?
Exactly. I think, yeah.
I'm saying if any damage is done to P53, then it is then we get the cancer, right? But then why is it that
Why is the
first of
cancer
all,
get fixed
any
in the first place? Are you asking that?
so I'm saying if cell is there, it gets damaged. So P53 should act.
Hmm.
If it is not acting, it means there is some problem with P53 itself.
Correct.
So that means the damage that has come in P53 should have come from some mutations, not from the damage itself.
Yeah, mutation. So this is damage means mutated P53 we are saying. But generally we are referring to damage, but it is mutated P53. So there is mutated P. Two events are happening. Mutant P53, DNA damage. Both are happening. Okay. Even DNA damage happens when we have not an active P53, it cannot allow the fixing of this damaged DNA. So it will continue. Damaged DNA will continue to go to next cell through cell division process. The idea here that P53 should stop it, but it is not stopping. So because of the inactivation of P53, cancer has happened because it could not stop it. It kept growing. And the damaged DNA, when it kept like, it's like a virus in your computer. If you keep attaching it to USBs and transferring it to other computers, virus will move on. So similarly, cells will replicate with the ability to cause cancer. And this is happening because P53 is not active or inactivated. So the role of P53 is absent here. That's why when tumor suppressor genes are affected, cancer can happen. Okay? Right. So this is briefly about cancer. And here we talked about what is cancer, hallmarks of cancer, and we talked about oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. Oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes we briefly discussed about. Okay, so this is in case if the question gets repeated in the exam, or if they ask about tumor suppressor genes. So be familiar about it. This is a bit additional information depending on how questions have come sometimes. Right. Now this is with that we'll finish. We finished talking about structural abnormality. So 9.4a is done. Second half of the 9.4a we talked about structural abnormalities. So A, B is done, C is done. Now we are left with D. Okay. So in the D there are many miscellaneous topics: genetic imprinting, genetic screening, counseling, DNA profiling, mapping, genomic study. There are about 5 different topics that we have here. 7 different topics indeed: imprinting, screening, counseling, DNA profiling, gene mapping, genomics. So briefly we go through these concepts. First we'll begin with the, as we just finished talking about the abnormalities, genetic abnormalities. Let's learn about genetic screening and genetic counseling. We'll learn about genetic screening and genetic counseling next.
In today's paper, they have asked the numerical aberrations.
Yes, okay.
So they've asked how many are possible due to numerical abnormalities in chromosomes.
How many?
The question is about how many numerical aberrations in sex chromosomes lead to genetic disorders.
Achha, types, like probably they're asking for different types of those abnormalities.
And that too in sex chromosomes.
So basically the 9.4b, right? Sex chromosomal abnormalities. The best thing in physical anthropology part and anthropology part, they just try to rephrase it. They don't even try to make it so complicated. Straightforward. If you understand the concept and examples, you'll be able to explain. They ask this question: elucidate how Darwin and post-Darwin theories of evolution resulted in the development of synthetic theory of evolution. So how Darwin and post-Darwin theories together led to synthetic theory of evolution. So basically, you write the sequence of those theories, starting with the Darwinian theory, post-Darwinian theories, and integrate it to show it is have synthetic theories formed. Genetic drift. Short note, 10 marks. Genetic drift. I'll show you this. Okay, I'm showing the paper here. So genetic drift. Can you write about genetic drift? What is genetic drift? Two types of genetic drift with examples. Bottleneck. You remember that? Famished populations. Bottleneck effect. Okay, so that, and interestingly, this is the first time they asked ethics and genetic engineering. Mostly because of the usage of human designer baby, CRISPR-Cas9 technology with human designer babies. They asked ethics and genetic engineering. So this is something that they asked for the first time. So we might have to cover a bit about the issues of genetic engineering. Senescence, referring to process behind cell death. We talk about this in unit 10. Yes. How many numerical aberrations in sex chromosomes lead to genetic disorders? This is a bit weird the way they phrase the question. How many numerical aberrations in sex chromosomes lead to genetic disorders? Basically, what are the different types of sex chromosomal numerical aberrations or sex chromosomal aneuploidies? So basically, you write everything that asked in given in 9.4, the Klinefelter, Turner's. So the way we have listed in the table, you show the table, okay, and briefly write about each of them. So Klinefelter, Turner's, super females, super males, those 4 categories you have to write. Okay.
So are they the only 4 or there are more? Common 4.
These are actually, even since my bachelor degree, I've been hearing about only them. So I believe these are the ones we get to see, we get to observe. There are some other abnormalities that I think we don't notice them because they're probably very lethal. But all the textbooks I have seen so far would talk about only this. Okay, so writing those 4 should be more than enough. Okay, how many numerical aberrations are there?
So impact of infectious diseases, will this be part of physical or?
Epidemiological. So yes, physical, it is part of physical. 9.8 epidemiological anthropology, health and disease. Impact of infectious disease on indigenous populations. In the current context, how COVID is affecting tribal populations. These things have come, right? To some islands, COVID had gone. Controlling it very, very difficult. So what is the impact of infectious disease on those populations?
That 7C talks about gene pool and
How
rules
do
of
marriage
marriage.
rules impact the gene pool of pop? This is a bit analytical that they have given here, not straightforward. You have to combine both cultural anthropology part, physical anthropology. Marriage rules. So basically, this is a way of talking about consanguineous marriages. So you talk about add components. What are the marriage rules that you find in India, for example? Blood-related marriages, niece marriages, for example, uncle and niece marriages. So, and other components. Basically, those practices which can affect the genetic sequences. So, inbreeding, mostly what they're asking about is inbreeding, right? Are you familiar with any other method which actually results in the variation in the genetic sequence? So to my best knowledge, it's mostly because you have cultural practices, but I don't think they would change the genetic sequences. So basically, they're talking about consanguineous marriages. They explain consanguineous marriage, how marriage rules in some regions of the country or some regions in tribal populations. Okay, how it results in inbreeding and how gene pool gets affected.
Or we could also state each marriage rule and maybe mention whether it affects positively or negatively to the gene pool, as in whether variation
You have to
increases.
choose something that affects the DNA. You can choose anything, any approach, which affects the genetic sequences. So gene sequences are affected mostly when inbreeding happens in a given culture, in a given population, right? Otherwise, random matings is not going to cause a problem. Random mating will not affect the gene pool. They will have equal equilibrium will be maintained. But only when you add bias to the selection process where the problem is. So we explain where the selection bias happens. Give cultural examples. Take example of a tribe or South Indian population, North Indian population, talk about it. And then explain how this affects the genetic equilibrium or gene pool.
This question, what could be a good introduction? Is it explaining what gene pool is?
How? No, I think the good introduction will be starting with the marriage part. You can go there. Different ways to answer this question. Explain how does marriage happen? What are the marriage rules in India? Okay. I think they asked in general, right? So what are the, take few examples and say what type of marriage rules exist. So if initial part explaining the marriage process, and then you have to focus on those processes which affect the gene pool. So then you introduce the concept of gene. Gene pool is a collection of genes. So their nature of these genes or sequence of these genes are affected depending on who gets married. And what are the marriage rules that affects the selection process? So marriage within the families, marriages within the caste, marriages within the religion. So go like that, go broadly to the level where you come to the consanguineous marriages and explain how inbreeding will affect it. Talk about inbreeding depression, give examples of diseases, how gene pool is affected because of these rare mutations in homozygous conditions. Okay? Like that. Yeah, this is something we're going to talk in next class, human genomic research. What are the applications of human genomic research in human welfare? So this is a topic I wanted to cover today. Once we finish talking about screening and counseling, that will not happen today. So we'll do that in tomorrow's class. Okay, right. So it is not too difficult. The paper is slightly reworded. Okay? The wording is slightly different, but I think they are referring to same all the questions. Racism, eugenics. Okay, right. So genetic screening and genetic counseling. First, we'll begin with the genetic counseling part, and then we'll talk about genetic screening as part of it. So have you heard about genetic counseling?
You mentioned in one of the previous classes.
So what do you know about it? What do you know about counseling? Have you ever came across this, or can you guess what this could be?
Probably when somebody is experiencing infertility or some disease, they may visit a doctor and they may suggest, based on their previous history, that they should get a screening done and maybe just let them know what are the possibilities and how to cope.
Okay, very much right. Okay. So genetic counseling is nothing too complex. Genetic counseling is understanding when it is done, who does it, what do they do in the genetic counseling process. So briefly knowing what is genetic counseling process. Okay. So in the background, what we need to understand is, so someone seeks counseling, as Vishal said. So someone seeks counseling when some abnormality is seen in their families, or maybe frequent miscarriages are happening. So something that is abnormal. They can go to genetic counselors. These are the trained people who are supposed to actually understand what's happening in the family, explain that to the couple who is seeking for help. Okay, so they're basically counseling. Like for example, people who are undergoing stress, we have psychologists. They talk to them, they counsel them, explain them why is it happening, what is the cause for that. and try to mitigate. Similarly, genetic counselors deal with the genetic problems arising because of the changes in the DNA sequences. So this normally we see them in hospitals where there are genetic departments where we have trained people to explain someone to make informed choices. Okay, I've taken this from a textbook where this in very simple manner talks about this process of genetic counseling. I'm showing that document here. Okay, so very simply, what is genetic counseling? Genetic counseling is a process where someone helps, okay, someone helps a couple to learn more about the causes of genetic conditions and how they affect them, and how they affect the people who are seeking help. So the goal of genetic counseling is to help learn about the causes of genetic conditions, about the causes of genetic conditions and how these genetic conditions affect someone, affect the couple in this case. Okay, so when someone actually goes for a genetic counseling, what leads to genetic counseling, or what is a requirement for seeking for help from a genetic counselor, or when should someone go to a genetic counselor? So counseling is explaining someone the cause behind something that happened and what will be the effect on the children, family. That is a counseling process, correct? So when someone seeks for this help, let's say if someone is a pregnant or considering to become a pregnant, okay, but they are little worried about their baby's health. There may be some pre-indication, maybe in the families that she got married to, okay, have difficulties, have issues, have genetic problems. In that case, they are unsure that what's going on. They may go to a genetic counselor. If someone is a pregnant or is planning to become a pregnant, they may seek help of a genetic counselor if there are some abnormal indications in the family. They want to know, so whether they have any problem, whether their children can have any problem. What is a genetic problem running in their families? Okay. Next, your baby had an abnormal result from newborn screening. So she is a pregnant, and for some reason, maybe because there was a concern like this that they wanted to figure out, maybe genetic counselor suggested them to have a test, or a doctor suggested them to have a newborn screening. We'll talk about screening. So basically, they do some tests on the child, okay, on the newborn. So they had the baby already, and the baby showed some abnormality in certain tests. Then they may go for a genetic counselor for help to see whether it is any genetic problem. If so, what would that result in? What type of symptoms or the features they may see? How well they should be prepared to take care of the baby. For that, they have to go to genetic counselor.
Is the newborn screening done for every baby? Or
Depending on the country. So in some countries like USA, for example, there are certain tests have to be done. So in a general sense, newborn screening is done for everyone, even in India, but they don't look for genetic diseases. Newborn screening, what do? They look for basic functioning of the eyes, vision, hearing, but they don't do any genetic tests. in many states in USA, for example, they collect blood. They have to check for some disorders, some genetic disorders, especially some metabolic syndromes like phenylketonuria. Those type of problems they look for. It is mandatory in some countries like that. But in India, I don't think we get any genetic screening done like that. We only test for normal features of hearing, vision, and the sensation. They will look for those type of things. Okay, I'll explain that. What is newborn screening? What it gets done in newborn screening in the next part, and they will understand. Or so the newborn showing negative or some indication of the genetic problem, or anyone in the family. Okay, the couple, child, or any other family member is diagnosed with a genetic condition. You may want to know. Let's say someone of your close family member had a genetic problem. Let's say a brother has a genetic problem. Brother, sister got married. But as she knows that her brother had a problem, she may want to seek help from a genetic counselor to know what is the risk factor for their children. If she happens to be a carrier, if she happens to carry that genetic mutation, if so, what is the chance that her child can have the same genetic problem that her brother had? This is possible, right? So if someone is detected with genetic condition, they may seek for help of a genetic counselor. Okay. Same thing here, but except for in the next point, you would like to know more. You already know about genetic condition, but you want to know more. What happens? What is the possibilities of having next generations being affected? For those things also, you may go for genetic counselor. So basically, when someone is carrying and in doubt about the genetic condition of the baby, or there is a positive screen for a newborn for a particular genetic condition, or a family member is affected. Okay, so like that, these can lead to someone taking the help or seeking the help of a genetic counselor. Sometimes more than that, there's history of not you don't know a genetic problem was there, but birth defects have been seen, or mental retardation is seen. Developmental problems are seen in the family. So this could be again because of genetic problems. So they can go and ask for help. Okay. Even in case of history of cancer, also someone can go like that. Cancer screening can also happen like this. They don't necessarily have to go to a genetic counselor. Nowadays, they can go to an oncologist and figure it out. If it is because of, let's say, if it's like a BRCA1 gene, so chance of getting breast cancer. Doctors can also explain it. But if it is purely more genetic in nature, genetic counselors are the people to go to. Is it clear? When someone needs to seek genetic counseling, help of a genetic counselor, when there is an indication or a known problem or a potential problem in a family. Simply, if I have to tell you. So what does a genetic counselor do then? So what happens during genetic counseling? Nowadays, because of the issues with privacy, first of all, they have to take the consent of the person that they are asking some personal information, and purely for providing this help, and this information will be kept confidential, will not be shared with some. So first of all, you have to sign this as soon as you enter into that place. So basically, that they promise you that they are maintaining the private information confidentially. So they are agreeing to that, to share that information based on this understanding. So what do counselors do? Counselors, as soon as this person goes, pregnant women or someone with the plan for the future pregnancy, or already had a baby with the negative indication in the diagnostic test. So these people have to give their family history and medical histories. Are there any family members have same symptoms? Okay, is there any medical history in the family? So family history is being asked. Then explain how genetic conditions are passed down through families. So they will ask about the family. Okay, is anyone, like for example, hemophilia, if someone is suffering from hemophilia, he will ask you, are there any family members in your family who is suffering from hemophilia? Let's say they don't know about the condition of hemophilia. Then they can ask them, are there any family members who, when meets with an accident, has continuous loss of blood and no clotting happens? So they would ask for those symptoms. Or Down syndrome. Do you have anyone in your family? Of course, Down syndrome is not heritable, like sickle cell anemia or cystic fibrosis or any of those genetic diseases. They can ask about genetic diseases to figure out if it is running in families. Okay, once they get it, they actually create a family tree. This is called a pedigree. This is not dog pedigree, okay? The pedigree here refers to family tree, drawing a family tree. We'll talk about this in 9.1. In human genetics, we will go through such problems, such cases. If a family member has an autosomal dominant disease, what will be the inherent pattern? If someone is suffering from a sex chromosomal recessive disease, okay, we will not have that like that, but X chromosomal disease. So what will be the pattern that can be seen in the family? So those pedigrees are created. So family histories are created. Family trees with a possible uh, pattern of inheritance can be created. Next, figure out whether you or your family members are at risk for disease. If it is running in families, what is the risk factor in next generation? Let's say that it has not happened in you, but is there a possibility to have this in future? Any symptoms? Because some diseases are late onset diseases that we have. They get started later, at later point of life. So they can tell you the risk factor for you and also for your future family members. Children, what is the percentage of chance that your child will have hemophilia, sickle cell anemia? They can tell you. Find and give you information about genetic conditions. Tell you about the features. As we talked about Down syndrome, they can give you an idea. Okay, this is good likely problem. This will be the genetic conditions. These are the possible or available treatment options. This is the life expectancy. All that information will be given by genetic counselors. So genetic counselors are those people who have this knowledge about the diseases we are talking about, and they can explain someone who probably have or potentially have this condition, okay, through proper evaluation. So you see what counselor is doing, knowing the family history and medical history, and creating a pedigree chart and explaining if this is going to pass down to the families, and if so, what is the risk factor for that person and for their children. They can even give, like for example, they can offer guidance to help make informed choices or life plans. If someone wants to marry their cousin, okay, so cross cousin marriages, which are very common, right? But they're worried. They want to know what is the percentage of chance of having certain genetic diseases. They can go to the counselor and ask, so that they can make an informed choices whether to marry someone in the family or not. So this is when choosing the mate. Second, so let's say they already married. Now they are worried whether their children will have the problem. Even then they can seek the help to decide whether child has any risk for having a rare genetic disorder. If so, I was telling you this, they can make a decision to not to have that baby. They can go for abortion. Okay, so to make such informed choices of marriage and having children, genetic counselors can be of great help. Next, to provide information about testing options. So genetic counselors, of course, they will only know so much through family histories. Sometimes they have to ask you to go for certain tests. So they will tell you what type of genetic screening is needed. Okay, they will tell you what type of genetic screening is needed. If such a genetic screen is going to cause a problem, then what is the chance of risk? If the test itself can cause a problem, I'll briefly tell you that in the case study that I'm going to show you. Next, help you find referrals. Again, they further tell you who to meet, what doctors to talk about. Okay, so they will guide you to the next step. So this is what a genetic counselor does. Be able to follow this is something really simple. The role of genetic counselor is someone has a potential genetic problem. They counsel them and help them to understand what the genetic condition and what will be the features or the effects on their family, what screening needs to be done, and what are the available options for them for treatment. So this is the role of a genetic counselor. So do you see what is genetic counselor, what genetic counselor does, and what exactly he does? Okay, I think process of genetic counseling kind of overlaps with that, so I don't think I need to go through this. Understanding genetic condition, discuss the options regarding disease management, risk associated with that, help the individual and family to identify the certain tools, psychosocial tools, so that they have to come out of this, what type of training is needed, what type of books they need to read, okay, those type of things they would help with. So to manage that psychological trauma they may have to go through and reduce the anxiety. Okay, this is basically that. I've also provided a case study for genetic counseling here briefly. So this is about a lady with of 25 years of age, pregnant, having first time pregnant. So she's having her first child. So she went for a particular blood test, a biochemical test she went for. This is called, particular name to this test. It's a screening type of test. It's a blood test. Okay. So a screening test that they have done, there's a specific name to the test. I've avoided here. Basically, a biochemical test has been done. The blood test has shown certain proteins in that baby's blood is high. So which is indicating that the baby can have Down syndrome. So she has done a test. She has not delivered the baby yet. Certain screening test has shown that baby could have Down syndrome. There's an indication like that. Okay, so doctor said she has to go through, as there is already a positive test for that, there is a likelihood of that. The doctor spoke to her and suggested to go with particular test called amniocentesis. The next topic I'll briefly explain you. What is amniocentesis? What is amniocentesis? Okay, so an amniocentesis, this is a particular test taking a DNA sample of the baby. So which is very risky. Okay, so this doctor will explain her. So what is the elevated risk of going with amniocentesis? Can that result in the abortion? So generally 1 in 200 people get aborted or gets the fetus will die because of the test itself. So they will tell you, they'll explain the risk factor of doing the test. And if the test is not done, what is the risk factor with the Down syndrome baby? They'll explain. So that is what happened here. He explained, the doctor explained her. And also age-related risk factor that any 35-year-old woman has of having a baby with the Down syndrome. Any 35 years of women has a higher chance of having the baby with Down syndrome. We talked about that, right? With increase in mother's maternal age, Down syndrome risk increases. It doesn't guarantee, but risk factor increases. Therefore, in many places, women over the age 35 years routinely afford amniocentesis for every pregnancy. In countries like USA, if someone is over 35 years of age, they may go through amniocentesis, genetic screening of the baby. Okay, Bali tells the counselor that she knows that babies with Down syndrome are usually born to older mothers, and she therefore believes amniocentesis is unnecessary. They say people, who more older tends to have this. So the counselor had to explain her. During the session, the counselor tells Bali her age-related risk for having a baby with Down syndrome, which is approximately 1 in 1300. So he told 1 in 1300 at the age of 35 would have this problem. So he explained the risk. The counselor then tells Bali about the limitations of the screen test and how her increased risk was calculated. Okay, explains how this is done, and the screening test that they talked about, what are the limitations and why this amniocentesis need to be done. The initial blood test is not enough. Amniocentesis confirms the problem. He explained the difference between those two tests. The counselor describes the chromosomal basis of Down syndrome. He explains how Down syndrome happened, what could be the cause, is it inherited from the family member? So he explains it. Okay, and what Bali might expect in caring for a special needs of a child. If they decide to have the baby without going for amniocentesis, so what they need to worry about, how they have to take care of the baby. Is it okay with them to have that steps taken? Are they economically well enough to have these options taken? So this counseling will happen. Okay, so like that, finally the counselor tries to assess the Bali's personal emotions. How is she taking it? Is she really worried? Is she actually under stress because of that? So they even handle that and explain the perceptions. If she's worried about how people take it in our family and neighbors, so in the social context, so they'll explain that. So this type of counseling happens. Okay, this is a scenario like that. So briefly, this is a process of genetic counseling. So nothing complicated, just the concept of genetic counseling that you need to know. I have not seen questions on this, okay, so far in the exam, but be familiar about it. Any questions on this? Any questions on genetic counseling part? You're unsure whether you have questions or not?
Only amniocentesis.
Yeah, I'll explain that. So next part in genetic screening, I'm going to explain. There are two methods that we are going to compare there. Amniocentesis is one of them. Okay, CV as chorionic villi sampling and amniocentesis. Briefly, if I have to tell you, in the mother's womb, there's a fluid called amniotic fluid. So baby is actually put into that in amniotic fluid. So baby's DNA material can be found in the amniotic fluid. So what do they do? Normally when they have to test this, they put a syringe into the mother's womb and collect the amniotic fluid. So and they check, they look for the baby's abnormalities like karyotyping. Those things can be done on the amniotic fluid. So it's a fluid covering the baby in the mother's womb, collection of which will provide the sample, DNA sample of the baby. Okay, so then you can look for any abnormalities in the baby's DNA. That is what they do. That is what's called. That is what's called amniocentesis, screening of amniotic fluid. Okay, right. So yeah, I think I'll stop the class here. In the next class, I'm going to continue with the genetic screening. So I briefly mentioned to you that screening has to be done. So what is genetic screening? At what levels does screening happen? So we'll talk about that in genetic screening, and we'll finish talking about gene mapping and genomic study. So Human Genome Project we are going to talk about, and genomic studies in India, the question that came now in the mains today. So we'll talk about that question in the next class. And let me see. For sure, I'm going to cover gene mapping and genetic imprinting. DNA profiling, I may cover in another unit. Okay, I'll try to wind this up because those 4 topics, except for gene mapping, they are short topics. Okay, we can quickly finish them. So most likely in the next class, we can wind up the 9.4 unit. Okay.
So when have we scheduled the test, if we have?
Friday, coming Friday.
So 9.3 and 1.4.
Correct. So 9.3 and 1.4, yes, evolution and the population index.
Oh,
Okay. So when do you get the test usually? Sir sends you the test or uploads it on the website?
uploads on the portal, it unlocks at 5 o'clock. I mean, this one it unlocked, or on Sundays it unlocks on 9 o'clock, something.
Okay. So you are given certain time. So like for example, if we do that at 5 o'clock, so are you given certain time limit to finish the
Yeah,
test?
90-minute test. So he gives extra time because we need to take photographs and upload it. So
Okay.
So we are allowed to submit later on as well, but he asks us to finish this test within the time frame.
Okay. So you time your answer basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. We can do that. But initially, I think it is all right because initially you are not too worried about time, but you are worried about what to write and structure of the answer. Initially, it's all right to be here and there on the time, but I think we have to focus. You have to be just about the time, but focus on the content and what needs to be present. Okay, right. We'll do that. Okay. Right, guys. Then. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.